My name is Ethan. I'm 26. I drive a maintenance truck, and I fix things for a living. 3 months ago, my best friend hugged me at the airport and said, "Take care of my wife while I'm gone," and I thought he meant the gutters. I still remember the exact moment it stopped being about the gutters. Late evening, her kitchen, the refrigerator humming, her fingers staying on the glass just a half second too long. She was 44, married, and the loneliest person I'd ever been close to. And one night, sitting on our porch steps at 2 in the morning, she looked at me and said, "With you, I just forget to perform. If you're watching this right now, tell me where you're from in the comments, because I still don't know if what we did was wrong." There's a moment I keep coming back to. Late evening, Mark's kitchen, the refrigerator humming low and steady, like it was the only thing in that house that never stopped working. Claire handed me a glass of water. Her finger stayed on it a half second too long, not long enough to mean anything, not short enough to forget. I thanked her. She nodded. When I turned to leave, I could feel her still standing there behind me, perfectly still, the way a painting stands still, like she'd been standing still for years. I didn't look back, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm Ethan, 26 that summer. I've worked maintenance for a property management company, nothing glamorous. I drove a truck, fixed things, showed up when things broke. Honest work. It paid the rent on my apartment 2 streets over. That was enough. Mark Dawson was my best friend since we were 19. We were different in almost every way. He was sharp, ambitious, always moving towards something. I was more comfortable in the quiet. But some friendships don't need an explanation. They just fit. Claire was his wife, polite, composed, always put together in a way that made you feel slightly underdressed standing next to her. 44, though she didn't look it, not in a flashy way, just in that quiet, lived-in way some women have. Like life had treated her carefully, even when it hadn't. I liked her and respected her. I never thought about her in any other way. That's the truth. That morning Mark left 3 months overseas, I drove him to the airport. He was in a good mood. Laughing, easy, the way he always was before a job. At the drop-off lane, he grabbed his bag, clapped me on the shoulder, pulled me into a quick, tight hug, right before he let go, right against my ear. "Take care of my wife while I'm gone." "Yeah?" Already laughing as he said it, casual, like asking me to water a plant. I laughed too, told him of course. He disappeared past security without looking back. I drove home with the radio off, not thinking about Claire. Not yet. I waited 3 days before going over. Claire answered in a pale blue dress, hair loosely pulled back, one strand falling across her cheek. She didn't bother pushing away. I fixed a flickering hallway, light loose connection. 10 minutes. She watched from the end of the hallway the entire time, not hovering, just present. Afterwards she offered water. We stood in the kitchen, talked about nothing, the weather, whether Mark had landed, how Lily was settling back into school, normal, responsible, a man helping a friend's wife. I drove home feeling fine. The dinner wasn't planned. I came back Thursday about the back gate, and by the time I finished, afternoon had slid into evening. The kitchen smelled like garlic and olive oil, the most alive the house had felt since I'd walked in. "You might as well stay," Claire said, still stirring. Not looking at me. We sat across from each other at a table that could have seated 8. The silence between us wasn't quite comfortable and wasn't quite uncomfortable. Eventually Claire set down her fork. "He's always been better at work than at being home," she said. "Even when he's home, he's not really home." No bitterness, just a fact she'd long since made peace with. I didn't say anything. She changed the subject. By the time we finished eating, the air had lightened. But I'd filed that sentence somewhere without meaning to. He's always been better at work than at being home. It was the dishes that did it, side by side at the sink. Warm water, the refrigerator humming. She handed me a plate. Our hands didn't touch. Then, very quietly, "He hasn't touched me in over a year. The water's still running." I didn't move. I don't know why I said that. She said quickly, "I'm sorry." She turned off the tap. I stood there with a dish towel in my hands and didn't know what to do with my face. The honesty of it was so raw and sudden, I felt almost embarrassed for her, except she didn't look embarrassed. She looked tired, deeply, quietly tired, like she'd been carrying that sentence for 12 months and set it down somewhere by accident. "You don't need to apologize," I said, very carefully. She nodded once. She didn't speak again. I left not long after. Sat in the driveway before starting the engine. Something had changed in that kitchen. Something small. Something permanent. I told myself I wouldn't go back the next day. I went back the next day. She had the door open before I knocked. Coffee already ready. We sat at the kitchen table with mugs in our hands, in the morning light coming in sideways through the blinds. She asked real questions, not small talk. What did I actually want from life? Did I think about leaving? Was I lonely? I answered honestly. More honestly than I usually did with anyone. Yes. Sometimes, yes, I thought about leaving. And yes, lonely. in that low-level way that becomes so normal you stop calling it loneliness and just call it Tuesday. She smiled at that, not a polite smile, a real one, quick, small, gone almost before it arrived. Then we both laughed at the same time. Something clumsy I'd said, and the sound of it in that quiet house felt almost startling, like a window being thrown open. I felt the warmth of it in my chest, and then I felt it too clearly. I should check the back gutter before I head out, I said. She looked at me a second too long. Of course, she said. Mrs. Klein, 58 Blue House, directly across the street. Very small dog, very large interest in everything on that block. You must be the friend, she called from her porch one Friday afternoon. We talked briefly. She smiled, warm, but watchful, the kind of smile that's also a question. When I finally pulled away, I caught her still standing on the porch in my rearview mirror. And when I glanced back at the house, the upstairs curtain shifted, just a little. Claire had been watching me leave. That evening, I came back anyway. I sat on the porch steps without a plan. She came out 20 minutes later, sat beside me without a word. We looked at the dark street, the night sprinklers across the way, the orange glow from Mrs. Klein's window. Do you ever feel like you're living the wrong life? Claire said. Not dramatic, just curious. We talked for a long time, about being seen, about performing the right version of yourself, depending on who was in the room, about how love, after a certain point, can quietly hollow itself out and leave only the shape of itself behind. The space between us on that step was maybe 6 inches. I was deliberate about not closing it. Something in me knew those 6 inches were doing a lot of work. I should go, I said finally. Neither of us moved for another full minute. When I finally stood and walked to the end of the path, I turned back without meaning to. She was watching me with an expression I couldn't name. Not sad, not hopeful, something quieter than both. Good night, Ethan. Good night, Claire. I drove home with both hands on the wheel and the radio off. Somewhere on that drive I became aware of a thought I'd been keeping just out of view. I was looking forward to coming back tomorrow. This scared me a little, not enough to stop me. The mornings became a thing. I'd arrive with 2 coffees, black for me, vanilla creamer for her, learned without being told. She'd have the door open before I reached it. We'd sit at the kitchen table or the back porch depending on the light. No pretense anymore, no fixtures to fix, no gutters to check. We both knew why I was there and neither of us said it. One morning she looked at her mug and said, with most people I have to perform, be the version of me that makes sense in context. Claire Dawson, wife, mother, neighbor, a pause. With you I just, forgetty. The truth was, I felt the same way. And every morning I drove home, I had to remind myself where I was, who I was, whose house that was. I had to remind myself more and more. She came to my apartment on a Wednesday night. No warning. A knock. I opened the door, and there she was, jacket over her dress. Hair slightly windblown like she'd walked over without entirely deciding to. I needed quiet, she said. Oh, okay, I said. She walked in slowly, looking at everything. The beat-up couch, the reading lamp, the paperbacks, stacked on the floor. It's smaller than I expected, she said. It's honest, I said. She looked at me then. Something passed across her face, warmer than pity, less simple than admiration. Like she'd just understood something about me she'd been guessing at. We sat on opposite ends of the couch with a throw pillow between us that neither of us had placed there on purpose. We talked quietly. At some point she picked up one of my books, turned it over. Do you actually read these? I actually read them. Mark doesn't read. She set the book down. I used to love that about him. So practical, so focused. No, I shouldn't finish. Now you want someone to read with? I said. She went very still, then laughed. Soft, barely there. Something like that. The lamplight was doing something unfair to her face. She was close enough that I could smell her perfume, vanilla, something woody underneath. And I had this overwhelming urge to say something I had no business saying. I didn't say it. She stood suddenly. I should go, yeah. At the door, she paused, hand on the frame. Thank you for this. You don't have to thank me, I said. She looked at me one more time and then she was gone. I stood at the closed door for a long time. My apartment felt different after that. Like she'd left some frequency in it I could still feel, humming just below hearing. The call came on a Tuesday evening. I was in the living room and Claire's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, a small gathering of herself. Then she answered, Hey, no, just watching something. Quiet evening. Mark's voice. I could hear the shape of it but not the words. Ethan stopped by earlier to fix the gate hinge. A pause. Yes, he's been helpful. Perfectly calm. No hesitation. Not a wrong note anywhere. She didn't look at me once. When she hung up, he says hi. How is he? Busy. Good busy. Good busy. She unmuted the television. I sat there with the ice in my glass slowly melting, thinking about how naturally those words had come to her. Ethan stopped by. Helpful. Yes, all technically true. And somehow that made it feel worse. because I realized she'd done this before. Not lying, just managing. Keeping the pieces of her life in separate rooms so they never bumped into each other. She was better at this than me. Outside, the night sprinklers came on. I sat in my best friend's living room beside his wife and told myself everything was fine. I almost believed it. There's something nobody tells you about guilt. It doesn't arrive all at once. It doesn't knock you down. It seeps slow and quiet, like water finding its way under a door. You don't notice it at first. You just notice the floor feels different, softer, less solid than it used to be. That's where I was. The week after the phone call, something shifted in Claire. She was still there when I came over, still made coffee, still sat with me in the mornings, but there was a distance in her that hadn't been there before, like she'd stepped back half a foot and decided to stay there. She answered questions with fewer words, laughed less. When I told a story, she'd nod and look at the table instead of at me. I told myself she was tired. I told myself it was nothing. But I knew, somewhere I didn't want to look directly at, that the phone call had done something. Hearing Mark's voice in the room with us, even through a speaker, even from thousands of miles away, had reminded her of something she'd been letting herself forget. And she was pulling back before things went somewhere neither of us could return from. I understood it, I just didn't like it. By the end of that week, she'd stopped answering my messages. Not blocked, not cold, just quiet. A read receipt and nothing after it. I had to drive past the house on my way to a job and the curtains would be drawn, the car in the driveway. No sign of movement. One evening I sat in my apartment and looked at our message thread, scrolled back through weeks of small exchanges. Good morning. Did you eat the gates, making that sound again? One from her at 11 at night that just said, still up. I stared at that one for a long time. Then I put my phone face down on the table and went to bed. Jason came over that Saturday. My older brother, 34. He worked construction, said exactly what he thought, and had zero patience for what he called dancing around things. He brought beer. We sat on my small back patio and watched the evening settle. He let that sit for a moment, the way he always did when he didn't believe me. Mark stood away. Yeah, you been checking in on his wife? Here and there. He took a long drink, set the bottle down slowly. Ethan, don't. I haven't said anything yet. You're about to. He looked at me sideways. Not angry, just steady. I'm not judging you, he said. I'm just asking you to be honest with yourself about what's happening. 'Cause I know you. And I know the way you've been lately. What way is that? Careful, he said, like a man trying not to break something. I didn't answer. He picked up his beer again. She's Mark's wife, he said simply. Whatever it is, however it feels, she's Mark's wife. And he trusts you. The words landed quietly. No drama. That was the worst part. If he'd been angry or loud, I could have pushed back. But he said it the way you'd state the weather. It's just true. Just sitting there. I know. I said, okay. He nodded. Good. We finished our beers. Talked about other things. He left around 9. I sat outside alone after he was gone and looked at the dark sky and felt the full weight of what I'd been carrying without naming it. It didn't feel better for naming it. The days after that were quiet in a way that had a texture to it. I went to work, fixed things, came home, made dinner, watched something, went to bed, normal life. The life I'd had before any of this. It felt like wearing clothes that no longer fit right. I walked past Claire's house twice that week. Once in the morning on the way to a job, once in the evening, coming back. Both times the curtains were drawn. Both times I slowed without stopping. Both times I told myself it was fine, that this was the right thing, that distance was healthy and necessary and what both of us needed. I almost convinced myself. Then I saw her. Thursday morning. I was driving by, not detouring, genuinely passing, and she was in the front garden, crouched by a flower bed, gloves on, pulling weeds. She didn't see me. I slowed, almost stopped. She sat back on her heels, pushed her hair out of her face with her wrist, looked down at the dirt. And in that single unguarded moment, no one watching her, no role to play. Just a woman, in her garden, on a quiet Thursday morning. She looked lonelier than I'd ever seen her look. Not sad lonely, just alone. In that specific way that has nothing to do with whether other people are around. I drove on, but I thought about that image for the rest of the day. The way she'd pushed her hair back. The way her shoulders had dropped when she thought no one could see. I thought about it that night too. I decided to let go. Properly. Not just distance, actual closure. I deleted the messages. Not angrily, just quietly. The way you clean out a drawer. One by one. The late night ones. The good morning ones. They're still up. I held my phone for a while after him. Then I set it down and looked out the window. Across the street and 2 houses down. Claire's house sat dark. All the windows black. Curtains closed. I thought, this is better. This is the right call. In a few weeks it would all settle back into what it was supposed to be. Mark would come home. Things would normalize. The whole thing would become a strange, warm, slightly aching memory, something that almost happened. I told myself that. Then the porch light across the street came on. I sat still for a long moment. The light just stayed on. Steady, no movement, no shadow, just the light. I looked at the clock. 2 in the morning, I put on my shoes. I don't know what I told myself as I walked over. I'm not sure I told myself anything. Sometimes the body just goes somewhere and the mind arrives later. She was sitting on the porch step, jacket over her pajamas, a mug in both hands, looking at the street like she'd been watching for something without knowing what. She looked up when she heard me on the path. Neither of us said anything for a moment. Then I sat down next to her. Same step, same 6 inches of space between us. The same space that had always done so much work. The night was cool, quiet. Somewhere down the street a cat moved through a hedge. Couldn't sleep, she said finally. Not a question. No, I said. She nodded, wrapped her hands tighter around her mug. We sat in the silence for a long time. Not the heavy kind of silence. The other kind, the kind that means you don't need to fill it. That just being next to someone is enough of a sentence. I hadn't felt that in a long time, even with her, in recent weeks. But here it was again. I pulled away, she said eventually. Quietly, matter of fact. I know, I needed to. I know that too. She looked at the street. It doesn't mean. She stopped, started again. I just needed to remember where I was, who I was. Did it work? I asked. A long pause. Somewhat, she said. I almost smiled. She almost did too. The cat down the street made a sound and disappeared. We sat for another half hour, maybe more, talking a little, quiet a lot, nothing resolved, nothing explained, but something eased in both of us, I think, that particular tightness that comes from two people pretending they aren't aware of each other. When she finally stood to go inside, she paused. You should sleep, she said. You too. She looked at me for a moment with her hand on the door. I'm glad you came over, she said softly. I didn't say anything. She went inside. I sat on the empty step for a while longer, the porch light still on above me, the neighborhood completely still. I walked back home in the dark. I slept fine that night, better than I had in weeks. We didn't talk about it after. That was the new rule, unspoken, built between us in the space of 1-2 porch and the wordless agreement that followed it. No explaining, no naming, no forward talk. No conversations that started with what are we doing or where is this going. Just this, whatever this was. She was up early sometimes when I walked past. The porch light would be on and she'd be inside, visible through the kitchen window, and she'd lift a hand, a small wave. I'd lift mine back. Some mornings I'd stop. We'd have coffee, talk about small things, what Lily had said at dinner, a bird that kept hitting the same window, a book I'd finished. Nothing waited. Nothing that required careful navigation. Other mornings I'd keep walking and that was fine too. There was a freedom in it, in the lack of expectation, in the quiet understanding that neither of us owed the other anything except honesty, and the honesty, by then, was in everything we didn't say. One evening, about 2 weeks after the porch, I was over for dinner again. Lily was there this time. She sat across from me at the table, doing homework between bites, looking up occasionally with those observant eyes that missed absolutely nothing. At one point she looked at me directly. Do you like it here? She asked. At our house, I mean. Claire went still for just a moment. Sure, I said carefully. It's a good house, Lily Claire said quietly. I'm just asking, Lily said, without looking up from her homework. There was a silence. Then Lily said, still not looking up. Mom laughs more when you're here. Just that. Then she turned a page. Claire didn't say anything. I didn't say anything. The refrigerator hummed. After dinner, Lily disappeared upstairs. Claire and I did the dishes side by side, the same way we had all those weeks ago when everything started to shift. She didn't say anything about what Lily had said. Neither did I. But I thought about it. On the drive home, I thought about it. The simplicity of it, coming from a 16-year-old who had no reason to soften anything. Mom laughs more when you're here. I didn't know what to do with that. I just knew it sat in my chest for a long time after. 3 weeks before Mark was due back, I was fixing the latch on the back fence when Claire came out with 2 glasses of iced tea. She handed me one without a word, sat on the back step. I finished the latch and sat beside her. We were quiet for a while. Then she said, he comes back on the 14th. I know. Things will go back to normal. She said it carefully. Not a question, not quite a statement, something in between. Yeah, I said. She turned the glass in her hands. The ice clinked. Do you think about it? She said. What things going back to normal means. I thought about it honestly. Sometimes, I said. More lately. She nodded slowly. I want you to know that. Whatever it was, I don't regret it. I looked at her. She was looking at the back garden, the flower bed she'd been weeding that morning I'd driven past. Small green things coming up, patient, unhurried things. I don't either, I said, and I meant it completely. She leaned her head back against the doorframe, closed her eyes for just a moment, not asleep, just resting, just still. The afternoon was warm. The neighborhood quiet, the ice in the glasses slowly melting. I didn't say what was underneath that. what I'd been carefully not saying for weeks, 'cause she knew, and I knew she knew. And saying it out loud would have changed something about the shape of it, made it harder or simpler in ways it didn't need to be. Some things survive exactly because you never press on them directly. The last evening before Mark came back, she left her porch light on. I saw it from my apartment window around 11, steady and warm, the way it had been that night 2 months ago when everything softened between us. I sat by my window for a long time. I didn't go over. She wasn't outside, I could tell. It was just the light, on, for its own reasons. Or for no reason. Or for the same reason. Things like that get left on sometimes. I watched it until I got tired, went to bed. Mark came home on a Tuesday. I didn't go to the house that day. Or the next. I gave it space. Gave all of us space. Let the house readjust to his presence, his noise, his good mood, and his work calls, and his way of filling rooms. I saw him on Thursday. He came by my apartment, brought beer, clapped me on the shoulder the way he always did. "How is everything?" he asked. "Easy, uncomplicated, quiet," I said. "Normal." He nodded, cracked his beer. "Thanks for looking out for them. Means a lot." I looked at him. Same face. Same easy confidence. Talked about his trip. His next one. A project in the spring. He told me he'd already started thinking about March. I said I'd be around. He left after a couple hours. Same as always. Easy, uncomplicated. I sat in my apartment after he was gone and looked at the wall for a while. That was months ago now. Things are different, and things are the same. I see Claire when Mark and I get together, birthdays, dinners, the occasional Sunday in their backyard. She's polite, warm in that careful, composed way she has in rooms full of people. Her hair pinned back, her glass held just so. She looks at me the same way she looks at everyone else. Except once, maybe a Sunday evening last fall, everyone talking at the table, the light going orange through the kitchen window. She caught my eye across the room for just a half second. I loaded. Not asking anything, just a look that said, I remember. I remember too. Some nights I still walk past the house on my way home, not because I'm hoping for something, just because the route makes sense, the way routes do when you've walked them enough times that your feet remember. Some nights the porch light is on, most nights it isn't, but some nights it is. And on those nights, I slow down just slightly, without stopping, and then I keep walking. That's enough. He asked me to take care of her. I just don't think he knew what she needed, and I'm not sure, even now, that I did either. But for one quiet summer, in the small spaces between ordinary things, coffee mugs and dish towels and a porch step at 2 a.m, she was seen, fully, without performance, without the version of herself that made sense in context. Just her. And if that's all it was, and all it ever will be, I think that mattered. I think that was real. I think that was enough. End screen text. Some promises don't break. They just change shape.